Texas just made a law that could remove books about black people from school library shelves. And since it's literally Juneteenth, I want to talk about how history is repeating itself. Last week, House Bill 900 was signed into law in the state of Texas. A lot of people you'll see talking about it say that it protects kids from inappropriate content and obscenities. But if you look at the bill a little more closely, you'll find something really concerning coming from the state that was the last one to set slaves free. The bill prohibits libraries from carrying books deemed pervasively vulgar or academically unsuitable. And where do they get their definition for this totally objective and not vague criteria? From this Supreme Court case in 1982 that was full of issues. Basically, in the 70s, a group of concerned parents pressured a school board to remove 9 books from junior high and high school libraries. The board temporarily banned the books, but when an appointed committee of experts found that majority of the books posed no threat and should be returned, the board overruled their decision and kept 7 of the 9 books banned, describing them as anti-American, anti-Christian, and just plain filthy. That's a direct quote. Listen to the title of these books and you tell me if you think they sound that way. One of them was called Best Short Stories of Negro Writers, an anthology that featured legendary poet Langston Hughes, author of The Color Purple Alice Walker, Zora Neale Hurston, and James Baldwin. Another book was literally just called Black Boy, a memoir by Richard Wright, one of the most important authors in African American literature. Also an award-winning book about the struggles of Navajo people, and a memoir that addressed colorism and homophobia in 1950s Spanish Harlem. Are you noticing a pattern here? The moment people were given the power to dictate what books kids had access to, suddenly a bunch of the books about black people, brown people, racism, and discrimination disappeared. That's the case Texas lawmakers chose to use as their model when making this bill. And I don't think that's a coincidence. Yet again, we have someone using fear-mongering language about protecting children to hide a much more malicious desire to remove representation from kids that need it. One thing I always reflect on during Juneteenth is that when people couldn't restrict the freedom of black Americans, they instead chose to restrict information. Because if you hide the truth well enough, you can convince a free person that they're actually a slave. HB 900 can and will be used to restrict representation and remove books from kids. The question is, if authentic stories that affirm their identities are what they don't want them to see, what do they actually want them to be?